my goodness. Okay, so Bri, I am so excited that you decided to come on my little podcast. You are an award-winning author and also a spiritual doula. You've had some incredible and very, very unique experiences during your near death, and I would love for you to share some of those experiences with the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It is exciting. It was just announced that I have won my second book award. Um, that is on my third book. So, book number two is still in judging. So maybe I'll by the end of the year I'll come out as a three-time award-winning author. So
Amazing.
stay tuned. Yeah, my I didn't realize how unique my experience was. Because I'd heard a few other NDEs and I thought they were all really unique. So every single one of them is different. There's usually a lot of commonalities, but when I first started, reflecting on my experience, I never heard anyone talk about this void, this black void. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean. Most people I heard, go into a light or see a light or instantly in a tunnel or greeted by past loved ones or they have a life review first. Well, my near death experience happened 2017, towards the end of April, and it was at 2 in the morning, and I had been really, really sick. There's a lot of things that led up to that, partly 16-year journey at that point with a rare chronic illness that was progressive, as well as some just interesting metaphysical paranormal activity. And it all converged, and I ended up getting really, really sick at this time. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So when I realized my physical body had no more fight, my heart had no more fight, my soul had no more fight, I surrendered. And I called out to God, somebody, I wasn't even sure who that was. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. And I gave up. I gave up. I surrendered completely with absolutely everything. And in that moment, I heard this loud, booming voice. Are you ready? And right before this voice, everything had gone quiet, everything had gone still, everything had gone peaceful, everything had gone serene. The most serene and peaceful I had ever felt in my whole life. And so I knew something was there and something had answered. So I didn't hesitate to say yes. And in that moment is when my heart stopped and I was detached from my body. I entered this black, beautiful void. How could something completely black be beautiful? But it was the emotion of beauty, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And it was just pure energy, pure love. And I realized that the God, the creator, the whoever I called out to that had come to save me was in this space. And I was home. I was a part of this magnificent ball of energy, basically. Um, and yet it was so much more magnificent than I was. And I was just in awe. And I had no recollection of my body, this thing we call being human. I had no recollection of Earth, but somehow my consciousness still knew something was different. And so I asked the question in this dark openness, am I dead? And 3 monks appear out of this darkness and float on by and kind of like give me a laughing grin. And it took me 5 or 6 years after this experience to find out they were kind of laughing because there is no such thing as death. So how can one be dead if being dead isn't a thing, if it's not a reality? I didn't understand what it meant at the time. I just was like, okay, that's weird. Okay, that's interesting. No judgment or anything, just peculiar. And they float back into the darkness. um, then I experienced my own tunnel, vivid blue, filled with ones and zeros, binary code. I realized my soul's getting downloaded with amazing information. Not aware of what this information is, but just that I'm being downloaded. Then I end up in another space with an ascended master teacher, and depending on your culture, religion, society, that could be, any one of them. I never saw him. I just felt it was a ascended master teacher, and realized that the universe is created with math. Once again, numbers. I was never a huge math. I was good at math, but I didn't intend to go into a math field or anything. I never studied mathematics extensively. So for all this numbers and all these math things to pop up in my experience was, I still find quite hilarious. Um, then in the next part of my experience, I was with a lot of other beings. I mean, like thousands. And I call them beings because I never got the impression that they had been human or where they came from. Not that they weren't human, just I didn't know where their souls had been. And once again, I still wasn't aware that there was a thing called Earth and that I had just come from there. And in this place, um, there was the biggest theme was your thoughts instantly manifested, instantly created. So I looked at some snow-covered trees that beings were sliding down, having fun, and I thought, I don't like snow, and instantly turned to lush green when I was sliding down them. If I had a question like, what if I was in a different body, I was in three different bodies in this area, and one of them was a snowman. Yes, irony because I just said I don't like snow. But there are some beings working on this machine with a huge flame at the end of it. And I just thought, as a snowman, what happens if I get too close? Will I melt? Instant, in an instant manifestation. I was instantly underneath the flame, melted in a puddle of eyeballs. Thought, I wonder if anyone will help put me back together. Just that thought, and I was back together. So, um, the biggest theme in that area, I've come to probably realize that it's how powerful our thoughts are. And what I've also come to learn is how grateful I am that things do not happen that fast here. Our thoughts still create in this 3D physical human space, but I am so grateful we have time to change it. So, have you ever thought, driving and you see some idiot? That's awfully judgmental. Somebody struggling on the road a little bit, and you just have that thought, oh no, what happens if they crash into me? Well, luckily, we have time to be like, oh, maybe I should slow down. Maybe I should pass them. Maybe, you have all these different options to adjust that reality instead of just like, I wonder if they'll crash into me and boom, crash into you. So it's also frustrating because it can take time to create our reality. When we're having great thoughts and we're positive and we're, you know, in this great form of creation, sometimes we get frustrated because it doesn't happen fast enough. But I am so grateful that it does not happen instantaneously because I don't think we would make it as a species. um, so, leaving that area, some beans, there was a barbed wire fence that I couldn't see beyond, and some beans were passing through an opening, going into this blurry area. And I wasn't asked if I could, if I wanted to go, if I wanted to stay. I just knew I couldn't go with them, and it meant a larger transition. Um, didn't really understand what that was. I just was aware of it. Then the last place of my experience was this dark room with seven amazing, magnificent beings behind me. Not as powerful and magnificent as the creator that I was with in the void, but more so than the ascended master teacher I was in the numbers. Um, and at this point, my ego had been gone. I knew nothing about Bri. I was just pure. I was a pure soul. I was pure consciousness. That's why I had, several different bodies, and there was no pain, no fear, no ego. But in this room, as the scroll unrolls in front of me, and there's beautiful golden script being written on it, and I just know that it's something huge, like something probably shouldn't know, or I'm so excited and so grateful. And honored and wow, this is really important. My ego comes back and says, "Ha, you're showing this to a human. This human, why did you come back?" And just like that, the scroll rolled up and I was snapped back into my body.
Wow. Oh my God. So would you consider all these different places, different dimensions? Is that what you would
Yeah,
consider
I
them?
strongly believe they are all different dimensions. They were all very different, different energies,
Mhm.
different experiences, different visuals. So yeah, I've come to believe that they were different dimensions.
So the one where you were in where there's thousands of other beings, I'm just curious, did it feel crowded or loud? Because I'm just thinking if everybody can hear their thoughts, each other thoughts, like, do you have to direct it towards that being in order to hear it, or does it just seem like everybody's talking at the same time?
Yeah, I love that question. And I just spoke with somebody yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, about what this place sounded like, what these dimensions sounded like. And it hit me right out of the blue. I'm coming up on 7 years and I never once thought about the sound.
Mm,
Um, but I have reflected on, this, we want to call it telepathy, but just as you're imagining is telepathy is sending a thought, somebody receiving it, hearing it, and, communicating back just without language. It was even faster than that. So I didn't
interesting.
hear anybody. I don't think anyone heard me. It was a knowing.
Huh.
So as soon as I had a thought, I think, the energy and these beings in the place just knew. Um, there was a time where we all even danced as if we had choreographed this for millennia, and there was no one that said a thing. So um, there's only one part of my experience that somebody actually used verbal language to speak to me, and that conversation still hasn't reappeared. That is the only part of my experience that is still, well, that and the the scroll is,
Locked away.
yet to be revealed.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was no like hearing of thoughts. It was just a knowing, a sense of knowing.
So did they, these beings, did they look human?
Oh no, not at all.
Okay.
So the part of the void, I was just pure energy, no body. In the tunnel, I had more of a spiritual body. Then in the white room, I had a human looking body. By the time I got to this dimension with all the other beings, they looked more like, gosh, I'm still trying to find something that looks like them. Kind of a mix between a Russian nesting doll and maybe like, um, I don't know, maybe like a claymation. Although claymations, are awfully rigid, but
Mhm.
just the look of them um, was kind of reminiscent of a Russian nesting doll. Not that they opened up and had
Sure.
more; it's just the kind of look of them. Um,
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to imagine when you haven't experienced it. So, when I think thousands of beings, I picture them as like people in cloaks and
yeah,
lots of white light emanating from them.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
and that's probably what other people and other
Hmm.
experiences, talk about is these
Right.
tall beings and these cloaks and these
Yeah.
robes and these light beings. And no, mine were like they were short little dolls. Um, so,
Wow. That's
um, so the ascended master teacher felt like he had a human form looking back on it. And then the magnificent seven magnificent beings, I would say those would, I still didn't see them, but I could feel, maybe what they look like. And they're tall and cloaked and just, huge, huge, huge energies. They kind of remind me of, I was able to see my guides when I came back to my body, and they are super tall. I mean, like 8, 9 feet, just kind of cloaked white and huge, beautiful, magnificent wings. And they're usually, just on either side of me, behind me, always. So they remind me of that, but um, without, I didn't see the wings and, different color, I think. So yeah, just all the different, bodies and presences I felt and experienced was just, kind of a trip.
Yeah,
Um,
sure sounds like it.
well, and my my mom recommended I go to an IONS conference. So I knew very little about metaphysical, spiritual, um, NDEs, STEs, OBEs. I had very little knowledge. I was still, I was dealing with a chronic illness that was also like bizarre and crazy, a mixture of what looked like Tourette's. My body would have involuntary muscle movements. Parkinson's, I would tremor really bad. I don't know how to describe dystonia other than dystonia. It's muscle rigidity, nerve pain, like fibromyalgia and anxiety, depression, OCD. So just trying to focus on being as normal as possible. I had no time to explore spiritual stuff. I was in survival, and so I knew nothing really about any of this. So I am so blessed that um, my great grandmother had 3 near-death experiences, and back then it wasn't really okay to talk about. So she only said, watch your words, and we're not meant to know everything. That's all I knew. That she had died 3 different times in 3 different scenarios, um, and a little bit more about what happened in the physical world around that. Not anything she experienced because she didn't talk about it. And then my grandma started exploring things outside of religion. She saw what religion did to her mom, what religion did to her dad, what religion did to their family. So she started exploring in her lifetime. And then she passed that on to my mom. And I grew up in a Christian household, and my mom was very, very supportive. A strong Christian woman, with the caveat she also had studied a little bit more about metaphysics, spiritual, and gematria, numerology, and really went on a different path. And so I see, looking back, each generation of women in my family has broken different religious curses, generational curses that had to do specifically with religion and spirituality. And so when it got to me, I had this crazy experience. My mom knew I was really sick. My parents were actually flying down to see me. They were very worried. And when I told her, you know, I I didn't really say it was a dream. I just said I had this experience.
Mhm.
Uh, she and I had involuntarily astro traveled before early on in my life, and she knew about that. So I was like, I'll just tell her about this too, because, you know,
Might as
this
well.
was crazy and everything was so crystal clear and just like unfolding. And I also had really weird feelings. I felt like I had been stuffed back into a sausage casing.
Mhm.
And I started freaking out about walls. They were so solid and dense, and it was really freaking me out. So I was telling her about this experience, and she's like, I think you had an NDE. I was like, no, you're crazy. Although my heart stopped for 8 minutes and it perfectly explains it. At the time, I was just like, no, you're crazy. But throughout the next few months, she implored me to go to an INS event, and I did. And it was lovely. I heard tons of stories about NDEs and people, going to these amazing, heaven, or at these places of healing that are just in marble castles, and, these magnificent beings, and seeing past loved ones, and having life reviews, and um, getting, having the chance to stay or go back and make decisions, and what's going to happen if you go back, and all this stuff, and it was beautiful. None of them sounded like mine, though. So I was like, cool, that's still not what happened. It wasn't until 3 years later. So my sister and I had gone to this IELTS conference in 2018. But we had no idea what to expect, so we didn't buy the full 5 days, and we happened to miss Evan Alexander. I heard his story on YouTube in 2020, and I was just in my apartment, and his story hit me so hard because it didn't sound like everyone else's. It sounded like mine. And in his transitions, there was always music. In my transitions, there was always numbers. And it hit me in the gut. I literally screamed out because I realized, oh, this was real. This had happened. And I still remembered everything super clearly like I do today. And so that was my first step in accepting what had happened and coming to terms with what had happened. It would take me another year and a half to be able to talk about how it happened, all the things that led up to it. All the crazy stuff, all the illness, and how everything just converged. And I shared my story on the first time with Jeff Mara. What I didn't understand was I was still in such survival that I didn't realize my condition had gone into remission. It had basically disappeared. And so I went on to Jeff Mara to talk about, oh my gosh, at this time I had studied more NDEs, and oh, I'm like Anita Morjani. I was healed, and all these other magnificent healings. And by this time I was back to my old job, my old home, my my old thoughts, my old identity, my old actions. I didn't know what to do with any of the knowledge. I didn't know what to do with, it took me over a year to realize I had no symptoms, which is crazy because I had symptoms every day. But that's how hard it was for me to be back in this 3D world. I was in such survival, I didn't even notice I stopped hurting. So I didn't know what to do with any of it. So I shared and I went back to my old identity and my old life, and it came back. And then I was like, cool, now I'm a liar. First, still processing this experience, and then I shared this, and then it came back, and cool, what does that make me? So then I went back into kind of another route of survival and kind of ignored my experience again. And just tried working hard, and the universe just kept hitting me over the head. And I wasn't paying attention, and I was just trying to, you know, do what I always thought I was supposed to do. Go to work, climb the corporate ladder, get a paycheck. Um, and I finally got brain surgery for the condition, and that was pretty successful. But my condition, myoclonus dystonia, it's still experimental, the brain surgery for it. It's known as a cunning disorder. It will learn its way around the surgery. And it only took a year for it to start to worm its way back in. And I finally met a wonderful team of doctors, and I was like, you know what? They're taking care of my physical body. I'm going to go work on some subconscious programs that have been written out of survival. I'm going to go, I'm ready to move on, create a new life, and, erase some of these programs. By the time we're 35, we are run on 95% of subconscious programs. And I wasn't 35 yet. I was like, cool, I've got a head start. Um, so I went, and I'd only heard of mindfulness meditation. And that kind of helped, it helped to deal with some pain and some emotions in the moment, but it never helped long term. It never had miraculous healing, anything. It was just really good for the 3D physical body. But that was the only type of meditation I had ever known. So I reached out to um, I guess I'd call her a life coach, maybe, um, fabulous woman. And I had already done so much work along this way of, cutting ties with trauma, cutting ties with abuse, cutting ties with, um, you know, all these really, hard, painful things in my life. Um, because honestly, I did it because I didn't have energy to deal with trauma and abuse on top of an illness. If I was going to make it in this world as a normal-ish human being, I needed to at least have a control over my emotions. So I'd done this work since I was probably 15. And so by the time I saw her 15 years later, she's also a psychologist and a therapist, maybe a psychiatrist. I'm not sure. She's got so many credentials, and she was like, "Okay, well, what happened?" Da da da. I'm like, "Okay, honestly, all of this happened. I've dealt with it. I'm fine." And I told her about these traumas with no emotion because I've dealt with them. She's like, "I know what you need," and she sent me to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. Um, she said, "Go. It's in a month. It's sold out. Show up anyway. Get yourself in." Okay, so I bought his intensive progressive programs, and just 2 weeks before the retreat, did all of them, did all the videos and the practices and everything. In the week leading up to the retreat, I created my way in using his own techniques and read his book, Becoming Supernatural, that week as well. So I just went hardcore. It was like, cool, if this is how I rewrite subconscious programs, this is how I'm going to do it. Um, so I ended up getting into the retreat, even though I was like number 30 on the walk-in wait list. Um, I refused to give up, and I refused to let what if set in and doubts and anything. And I just knew I was going to get in. So, and every time a doubt crept up, I would change that line of thought, detour, and move forward. So I got into this retreat. And once again, I studied heavily about this type of meditation in the week or two leading up to it. So by no means was that an advanced meditator. Like I mentioned, I only knew of mindfulness. So this was, I was just like, okay, well, this is interesting. I'll try it. And when he started talking about going to nowhere and nothing as no one in no time in no place, it hit me. And I get goosebumps every time I think about it. I'm like, that is so reminiscent of the void because then he says, when you're there, then it becomes everywhere, everybody, every place, every time. And the void that I was in was it was black, but it was full of energy. There was so much energy. Um, and it was infinite possibilities. It was creation. It was the center of creation. So he's talking about this nowhere, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is my void. And so I instantly became hooked. And I held on to every word to find out how to get back there. And in the second day of the retreat, um, I just let go and trusted the process. And I was once again disconnected from my body, even though I had more awareness of my body this time, and I was not dead. My heart was still beating, you know, um, actually probably in coherence, according to Dr. Joe. Um, and I'm back in this blackness. I'm back in this void. I'm back in everything, nothing. And in front of me appears my brain and my heart, and part of my near death tunnel comes in and starts to circulate, rewiring my brain and my heart. And I realize, oh my gosh, part of my tunnel has come back to cure me from myoclonus dystonia, not even the reason I was there. And the next day was 4th of July, and I knew I could shut off the deep brain stimulator, the brain surgery I had gotten for this thing. And with a great deal of trust and nerves, I shut it off. I've got a controller that I can control the amount of electricity, and I can turn it off or back on. So I shut it off, and then I waited, and nothing happened, and nothing continued to happen, and nothing has happened since. As far as the myoclonic dystonic symptoms, um, and I realized I had spontaneously healed. But then I went on this deep dive adventure to find out why and how. I realized it was not just the meditation. Meditation was a huge part of it, but it's because I had done all of this shadow work, all of this trauma work, inner child work. I didn't know the names of any of this before, by the way. This was all reflecting on the past 22 years of experiences, the, you know, experiences of my near death experience and what has transpired since then, everything I learned before then, all the work I had done before then. So all of it led up to me being able to spontaneously heal in meditation. And I've studied extensively on how other people heal, either over time or spontaneously, like I did. And it's come to my strong belief that anyone can heal from anything.
And that is really a wonderful message for everybody because I think that we're often so stuck in our heads. Our ego takes over, and we literally can't imagine that spontaneous healing is even possible. So our thoughts get into the way, and our thoughts are so powerful. And always have to remind myself as well because I catch myself going down this spiral of negative thinking or, just the typical human brain. And then I have to catch myself because I know how powerful the thoughts are. And I often wonder if I have created certain illnesses in my life that feels so dense and so heavy, right? But I think, and it feels real. It's not in my head. The actual illness is there. But I think that we really are able to not only think ourselves sick, but we can also heal by thought.
Well, and I
Um,
want to extend that a little further. It's not just thinking ourselves sick; it's feeling ourselves sick.
yes.
So, based on our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, even um, certain things can create definite actual illnesses, physical
Mhm.
things. I mean, you can even go to the doctor and be tested, and like, yes, I've got this condition.
Mhm.
And heck, even if you didn't create it through these high stress, high survival modes, it could have been created, environmentally wise, gene wise, physical wise. I mean, the list of
Epigenetics,
illnesses,
yeah.
yeah, the list goes on and on of how things happen and why we get sick. But knowing that you can actually create your health and you can create a way out of it, I think is even more important. So, not,
Absolutely.
a lot of people do end up with illnesses after very stressful events.
Mhm.
I'm sure sure Um, um, and stressful events, losing somebody very close to you, um, even work, if you're in a very high stress job, high stress situation, poor family dynamics, abuse situations, the list goes on. When your body is in survival, it your hormones get crazy. All the processes in your body kind of get wonky, which creates illnesses. So regardless of how it started, how it got created, if you're born with it, if something triggered it. For me, mine was a pharmaceutical injury. We were pretty sure. Of course, the pharmaceutical companies will not admit to it, and the
Mhm.
doctors won't either because they don't want to get in trouble with.
No surprise here.
So, uh, what, regardless of how it happened, you can create your future. You can create a healthy, happy life, and that is really what my mission is as a spiritual doula,
Mhm.
is helping you cut ties with that past sick, unhealthy, unhappy identity and create a new, happy, healthy identity. Create a new future. Create a new self. And a lot of that, as a spiritual doula, I'm a guide. I guide you through the spiritual process of it all. And I help connect your I help you birth into your authentic spiritual self, connecting your spiritual awareness with your physical body. But that means, changing your mind, your thoughts. If you're going down ruminations or what ifs, and catch yourself in these negativities, that's fine. That's human. We do that because we are trying to survive. But when you catch yourself and you redirect it, that's when change happens. When not just mental changes, but physical changes in your brain happen. new pathways are made, old pathways are dissolved. And it is magical. And when you connect that with your heart and your emotions and learning how to, change your feelings from anxiety and depression, overwhelm to opportunity and excitement and gratitude, there are, also hormonal changes that happen with that. And then when we get all of that connected, um, then we bring in your spiritual part. Then we learn. I teach you how to connect yourself to yourself, and whoa, that transformation is absolutely. I mean, the transformation along the way is incredible. People finding themselves, um, people in their 60s and their 70s who are just now realizing, maybe this isn't what my life was meant to be. And there's no time that's too late. You can always start creating your future and seeing amazing transformations in mindset, in self confidence, self compassion, self worth. And then, of course, the side effect, as I assumed, is physical healing.
Not enough people, I feel, know about this type of work, that it's even out there. I think you said in a different interview that you were a death doula first and you transitioned into the spiritual doula, or spiritual
Yeah, spiritual.
guiding. Yeah, okay. And I I keep coming across death doula as if this is supposed to be my path, and I keep pushing it away because I really don't want to have anything to do with that death part. I think it's a terrible term because it sounds so it sounds like you're just being cut off and that's it and you're done, right? Because in the end, I mean, death is nothing but what? A transition, and it's a new start. It's not an ending. Well, it's an ending to your physical, but it's not an ending to you as the soul. So I think somebody needs to rethink that word. I just
Well,
want
so I would love to chime in. A lot of uh, death doulas prefer to go by end of life.
this
Um,
sounds so much better.
and some people are like, yeah, death doula is like so harsh and so
Mhm.
abrupt. But coming from me, I would, when monks kind of laughed at me in my experience, like there's no such thing as death, and that's how I approach a lot of things, just very humorous, um, you know, kind of blunt, in a loving, blunt way. I'm sure you can kind of tell who I am based on our interaction together through this. So I'm not doing it out of like coldness. It's just there's humor in it. There's humor in life. Heck, I just said I don't think I like snow, and I ended up as a snowman. The universe is hilariously ironic, and the more you are in tune with it, the more that turns out to be hilarious. Gosh, I'm trying to think of some recent examples, and I'm just like, haha, universe, very funny. Because it's like there's a sick sense of humor.
Yeah. I
And
mean, I've heard several near-death experiences who talked about how humorous it actually is on the other side, and that God, if they have met God or have been in His presence, I'm just gonna say His because that's how I grew up.
well, and even, even though there's no gender, it
Yeah,
was genderless, it felt masculine. So
right.
that's why I say
Exactly.
he as well.
Yeah, good, good. Okay. They were pleasantly surprised that he has humor.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite I don't know. I feel like it takes a little bit of weight off your shoulders because I often wonder once we get on the other side if we lose ourselves, if we lose a piece of ourself or the way we are. And, because we don't have these type of emotions that we have over here anymore. So it's so hard to just fathom how we function on the other side.
Yeah, I would love to address that for a moment. A lot of people are scared of being reabsorbed into, the creator, or,
Mhm.
if we're an extension of God, do we just like merge back into him and lose ourselves? And absolutely not. But and that's why I say birthing into your authentic spiritual self is what I help people with, because they can understand that who they are as an essence, who they are as a soul is very much who we are. There are things that make us human. There are experiences that are, pretty specifically human, which is why we come here. I only experience joy, curiosity, and love on the other side. I spoke, or I didn't, I've spoken to her too, but her story, Betty Gudano, talks about her pre-birth plan and how she saw all of this pain and grief, that she was so excited because she was going to be able to experience this. And here as humans, it's like, there's no way I would have chosen that. And so, there isn't that duality on the
Yeah.
other side. And there is here. So I understand how that's hard to, kind of fathom and embrace. Here we have night and day, light and dark, good and evil, like our whole lives are duality.
Mhm.
So if I could, gosh, even like your best day still has duality in it though. Let's say remember your happiest, absolute happiest, most curious, just embraceful moment. It could be, when you're watching the sunset at a beach. It could be the moment after you give birth to a child. I don't have any kids, so I'm assuming. um,
It's pretty
and,
pretty good.
and the pain has subsided. You've got that rush of endorphins and oxytocin, all the wonderful hormones that the human body creates, the woman human body creates, and you're holding your baby on your chest. That has got to be a absolute blissful moment, and where everything just kind of disappears, and you're just fully embraced in this moment. Um, there could be other things as well, just the sunset, and kids are probably the sunset for me on the beach is one of the most powerful, or on a boat. Skydiving for me was the first time I went skydiving. It wasn't the jumping, it wasn't the falling, it was the moment after we pulled the chute. It was tandem, and it was perfect weather, and we were just frozen above the air. It felt like the whole world had gone still, and we just were this. It was magical. It was just not, you couldn't see anything else move, and it was just like we were frozen in time and air and space and everything. And I was just pure curiosity, joy, and love at that moment. Now take that and put it into a much larger picture. You just get different experiences that resemble, these joy, curiosity, love. Um, I'm not sure if other NDEers mention different emotions, but those were my strong ones in my experience. So it's it's like a kind of never ending just experience. But for me, it was constantly good. Some people have negative experiences the start and then they end up good. Um, some, came back without the good ending, happy ending and stuff. But a lot of experiencers, I'd say 75% at least, have these amazing experiences, and it's just you don't get bored of it. People are like, "Well, I think I'd get bored." Well, if you get bored, guess what happens? You decide to come back down to earth and learn some more stuff.
It's so funny you just mentioned that because as I was listening to you, I was thinking, I wonder if I get bored over there. Because if we don't sleep, we don't, what do we do? We just float around all day and create things if we want to with our minds. And it's just hard for me to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, so in the experience with my beans, the other beans, gosh, I was a robot body for a little bit. I tried to learn how to fly. I was terrible at it. I severed my arm on a pole, but there's no pain or fear, and I was just like, "What's gonna happen?" And I saw it grow back with binary code, and I danced with other beings, and it was just like, you know, constantly new experiences. So never once was I bored, and I don't think I ever
Mhm.
would have been bored.
Yeah.
But once again, I think if you do get bored, or if you're rejuvenated as a soul, that's why a lot of people believe in reincarnations, and we come
Mhm.
maybe not even back to Earth. Some people believe that we reincarnate to other planets. Reincarnate as humans many, many times, to learn different lessons, to experience different dualities, to experience different pains. So it's literally limitless. So, um, this is such a blip, but everything is a blip because I think you can reincarnate and, have that veil put back over you, have that veil of forgetfulness. So it
Mhm.
feels like this whole new experience every single
So I have heard several people who said after an NDE or just even a short spiritual experience that they came back with certain gifts that they may not have had before. Is that something that happened to you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was super overwhelming, which is another reason I was in survival again. I came back with medical intuition, so I could feel what was wrong with you. So, driving past a car wreck, I could feel if they had a seatbelt burn, if they had whiplash, if they had a broken arm or a leg, or if they had perished. So that was really overwhelming. I also came back being able to hear people's thoughts, and that was extremely overwhelming. At first, it wasn't so bad, but when I started hearing the negative thoughts and feeling those emotions behind the thoughts, it was so overwhelming. So yeah, I definitely came back with some gifts. And I shut I shut most of them down in my state of survival and confusion. But through my own, spiritual research and reawakening, I'd say, um, I've gotten some of those back. And being a spiritual doula, helping people on their transformation healing journey, the medical intuition definitely comes into play. I don't usually tout like, "Hey, I'm a medical intuitive. I can, tell you what is wrong and how to fix it." Da 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 da. I don't need to tell you what is wrong. Either you know or you don't. Um, it doesn't matter. I just tell you the because the how is going to be about the same for everybody. The exact processes and procedures and what really works with somebody is very customized and unique, but is all along the same overall path of cutting ties with your past and creating a new identity. But how people do that and how they're able to do that, that's where I come in and work with them one on one to tweak and customize because we're all unique souls, we're all unique individuals, and we all, require unique processes. But the overall theme is cutting ties with your past to create your future.
I think it's really nice to know that we don't get lost, that we're still individuals, however we're connected. And really we are while we're here in this body as well, but we're may not be feeling that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that was another hard part coming back is knowing how we are all from, this amazing place and we're all one, we're all connected, and how much hatred
Mhm.
and how much disconnection there is.
Yeah.
I really struggled. So I basically went from hell on earth, and my illness and paranormal stuff, hell on earth to, I wouldn't consider it heaven. I believe that there were higher elevated dimensions, but
Mhm.
I was in no way a negative one. It was super fun. All of them were super fun. Um, so I go to this place of all love, pure love, pure curiosity and joy, just to come back into this place that is so dense and so heavy and so negative, in comparison. And the reason I was freaking out about walls, it took me a few years to realize too. Like I said, I've done a lot of work and research. Um, Matter is the slowest form of energy. So I was in a place that, energy was just very flowy and, moving and bouncing and free. And I was bodiless and I was in different bodies and none of them were constricted. But I came back here where matter is the slowest form of energy. And so that's why all I felt like I was stuffed into a sausage casing. My spiritual body was in this tiny confinement and the walls are just solid. Um, but I helped people understand that that's the exact same thing that happens when you create. So you have a thought, it's out there. You find that creates that possibility or it finds that possibility. then your emotions bring that in and bring it to reality. Um, and it slows it down from a frequency that's way up here and slows it down to where it's in our 3D physical world. And it doesn't matter what your thought or your emotion is. If it's a negative one, like, what if I never get better? Or, oh my gosh, I'm just going to keep getting sicker and sicker. Or, all these negative ones. And then that fear comes up. A fear is a very, very powerful emotion. That draws it to you faster and it creates it then faster in this reality. But if you are able to change your minds, change your thoughts, you have that thought, but then you redirect and say, what if I do get better? Or when I get better? And, or, just all these positive, more optimistic thoughts. And then you have this love for it. Oh, I love that future that I'll be healthy, I'll be happy, or I'm grateful. Oh, gratitude is such a powerful emotion. If you are grateful for, oh, I'm grateful for this opportunity to learn, um, then that draws it in faster too and creates it. So your thoughts are powerful, your emotions are powerful in creating it to reality, and then it slows down. That's what takes time is the slowing down to make it happen.
You know, I'm basically what this sounds like. You have to vibrate a lot higher on a higher frequency in order to achieve healing and an actual transformation in your life. And I hear that all the time, that obviously grief, all these lower emotions can really put such a stop to your healing abilities, and you just feel so much more heavy and not able to, it's like sluggish. You can't really get moving, and people find themselves in this deep dark abyss where they feel like they are not able to climb back out of, which I was stuck in after my son ended his life. These negative emotions can really wreak havoc on your system. And but then people, like me, who feel like we need to be stuck in this grief, because if we don't grieve, oh my goodness, how can you not grieve? You just lost your child, right? So it's almost like you need to be there for as long as it takes, or and longer. However, I have come to the realization, after it's been a little bit over 2 years now, 2 years, 4 months, that I think you have a choice, and it is your choice and your choice alone whether or not you want to stay in this dense, dark depth of, sadness and depression, or if you want to pull yourself out and create a life that you you actually would be proud of when you come back on the other side, because I know my son doesn't want me to, be sad every single day. Of course, I mean, there's no way, if somebody would have told me the first 6 months or even a year that it's even possible to pull yourself out of this, I thought I was going to feel the way I felt back then for the rest of my life, however long that may be. And I think that's just a scary thought. And I'm in these groups with other parents who've lost their kids to suicide as well. And it's just so sad to read all these new parents come in and post about their kids, and I know exactly what they're going through in that moment. And I know it doesn't matter what we say in this moment, they have to go through their own processes and their own journey. And being a spiritual doula, what kind of what can you give maybe to parents who've lost their kids in whatever way? Um, Maybe give them a little bit peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to extend that from just being a spiritual doula into being a death doula as well. So, starting out as a death doula, a lot, most of how I helped people was through grief. grief of lost loved ones, lost relationships, especially, people who are grandparents that for some reason they got into it falling out with their kids and there's this gap and they want a relationship with their grandkids. The past, their past health, if they're young and they had this dream that they're going to do this and the health just it's terminal and they've lost what they thought would be their life, or even people who have developed chronic illness that have lost their past selves. Grief happens for any type of loss and it's very extensive. um so everyone does grieve in their own way, in their own process, and there is no timeline. And I love how you put it that you're not getting over it because you will never get over it. You have gotten out of it, out of the darkness. And I
Right.
absolutely love how you put that because people are like, "Well, I'll never get over this." Of
Mhm.
course you won't. That
Yeah,
is
exactly.
100% true. And that is not the point of going through these different grief sections. It's just they call it a cycle. It's not. It's a web. It's messy. It's sticky. You could be at 10 different emotions at once. You can have none.
Mhm.
Numb is an absolute legit response. But to go through and actually feel and let yourself feel and let yourself feel to a point. When you have gotten to the point where you are stuck and dense and thinking about even taking your own life, or that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that it's just, your life is over because your child took their own. That is when it becomes dangerous for your soul. It becomes dangerous for your physical self, and it's also unhealthy for everyone around you. And just like you said, your son doesn't want you miserable. That's not why he did it. He did it because he was probably miserable. So I'll also talk to, I don't share this often, but I have tried to take my own life before. And when I was going through it, when I was thinking about it, I was first time I well, first time I followed through with trying was I was 16, and I was 6 years into this illness, no diagnosis. My family was miserable. My parents didn't know how to help me. They saw me in pain and misery, and the doctors couldn't help. And so I knew that just my existence was so painful for them, that I thought, I haven't shared this in a while. I thought, wow, this is like a long time later. Like I said, I don't share about this often, but I thought if I ended it, that there would be no more pain for any of us. I mean, yeah, they'd hurt for a little while, but they'd get over it. Coming from a 16-year-old, sorry, this got deep. Um, but I think this is maybe important to share with parents who have lost somebody because I was almost that child. Um, and I really came out it from my family will be able to move on. They won't be stuck in pain with me. They'll be able to move on. And I didn't really, now hindsight is 2020. I didn't realize the damage that would have done to everybody. My parents, my sister, um, even my extended family. I had no idea. I just thought I'll end the pain for everybody. And I found a lot of people who do go, forward with it. If you talk to somebody, they label you. They, you know, there's not really help for people. They try to be helpful. They try to prescribe stuff. They try to do talk therapy. But when you feel that there is absolutely no light at the end of the tunnel, um, what else do? You stop your pain, not just for you, but you hope for other people. And so these children that have moved on probably didn't do it to hurt you. They probably did it because they didn't want to be in pain. They didn't want you to be in pain for them, not understanding the repercussions. So as a soul, even if there was something between you and your child that you feel like you're responsible for. Maybe you feel responsible for not knowing they were hurting so much, not hearing maybe some cries that they may have given out. You know, when you feel responsible and you blame yourself, on the other side, there is no judgment. There is no blame. Um, they they are in peace, and most likely they are still checking in on you, and they want you to, you know, be able to, you know, live on, live your life, maybe what they were hoping for. And when you blame yourself and you get stuck, um, there's not really sadness on the other side, but there is maybe a little more heaviness, connecting. So what can I tell other people? The last thing is soul contracts. Um, when I was 17, once again, not knowing of the spiritual metaphysical world, um, my mom had realized we had joined this together. We had decided to do this as a soul group. We've traveled in soul groups before. We've found out that we've played different roles in each other's lives. And time I was 17, I still wasn't diagnosed, but she said, "We're in this together for a reason. We don't know what it is yet, but we signed up for this as a soul contract." And hindsight and my experience and everything, it was absolutely true. We definitely designed these roles for each other, and me having the condition and these crazy paranormal experiences, she was her role was to be the support, be the advocate, go figure, like dive in and research about, medical conditions. Grew up in a medical household. And then the paranormal and metaphysical stuff I was going through, her mom had, given her insight to it. So she had that. So my grandma was also part of the soul contract. And, it's just interesting to see in hindsight. It's always in hindsight, which is hard. You can see exactly where these contracts come in. So um, I like to refer this more to someone who has lost a spouse early on, the love of their life, their significant other. They, sometimes lose in their 20s, a few years after marriage, and they will later then find out, or sometimes, people who are more aware and more connected, they'll understand that, oh, this was put in my life. We decided this, that they were going to move on to, transition out because I am meant to learn this, this, and this. It's much harder to say that with a parent who's lost a child than a significant other, but it's still the same instance. So I hope that answers your questions, even though it was full of tears.
I know, I know. I know. I really appreciate you giving your insights about that because it's just so hard for us who are left behind to even make sense of any of it, especially when we have not had an experience that's otherworldly. So I often just wonder, and I try to just reflect on everything, and it's just really hard as a parent, especially when it comes to suicide, not to get stuck in that cycle of constantly blaming yourself, because my goodness, that is the worst, because it keeps coming up over and over and over, and then I keep going there and I keep playing over different scenarios of what I should have done differently, and it's not healthy to be stuck in this cycle, because not just for my emotional well-being but also not my physical well-being. And I always hope that everyone who has been touched by this type of trauma is able to heal. And I know that sounds like everything would be, back to normal. It's never going back to normal, but it can become different in a good way. And and that is what I strive for, because I do not want to be stuck in this lower density of emotions. And I still cry every day. The tears flow no matter what. It's just going to be part of my life. I talk to Jaden all the time. Sometimes I feel like I talk to myself, but I was told he answers me, and so but yeah, that's a different story. But I just hope that you know, that also those who struggle with mental health will find their way out of this and realize that they are only here to learn a lesson and to just be in the physical, to experience all these things and to evolve and grow. And of course, some people say that, well, maybe this was part of their plan to exit whenever they have, because they have free will. I can't say that I agree with it because I don't like any of it. I don't want them to have free will. I don't want nobody to have free will. You're gonna make it until you're naturally done, but not on your own free will. But of course, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So
Well, and my sister, we've had these deep conversations. She's got a master's in psychology, probably to try to understand everything with her sister. um, but we've she's come up with a theory that I strongly resonate with. Is we may plan several exit points in our life for if things get too hard or too overwhelming, and um, when those times come, our higher selves will come connect with us, and you know, of course, most of us aren't conscious of it, but the higher self will step in and decide if it's actually a good time or not. So I've had many exit points in my life, which apparently my higher self is like, "You're not done. You're not done." Trying. I've tried to commit suicide. The first thought was at 12. Um, God intervened. I didn't, it was early on in my spiritual journey, but God definitely intervened. 16, it was just unsuccessful. Um, and then again after my NDE, because I was so upset with how, I mean, when I tell you I was in a whole new state of survival, I was desperate to get back. So it's only been after three of those situations, and the last one left me with a traumatic brain injury, a coma for 4 days. They were not expecting me to live, so um, yeah, I put my poor mother through the ringer, and my family. Um, but only after that did I. The first time at 16, I realized there was a reason. I've got to be resilient. Maybe not a reason, but I've got to be resilient. I've got to learn to adapt. So I was grateful that didn't. At the time, I was, and I was pissed. But then I became grateful because I really learned a lot about resilience, mindset, um, not to hold the victim mentality, and to adapt and overcome. And that led me on a beautiful journey. Graduated high school early, buying my first house at 19, grew up climbing the corporate ladder as a chronically ill person that no one knew really. But then after my the one after my NDE, and the having to really fight to do physical therapy and speech therapy and all these therapies to get back to a semi normal person. Um, I realized, okay, well, there's got to be a reason. I almost drowned in a river. My kayak flipped over, and I was pinned underwater with a life jacket. It's like, oh, this is how people die in a foot of water. And I remember saying my goodbyes and being out of air, and the the times that I could have, maybe should have gone from this life. I think is why my sister says, and I strongly believe it, that we in our pre-birth plan and our soul contracts, we insert different, um, what did I call them? Opt-out points, I guess. Exit points.
exactly.
So it could have been part of the plan. That maybe it goes this way. I believe our human lives are like a mansion, and we choose what is in each room, but we choose how, like, so before we get here, we choose what's in each room and where those rooms are. But in our lifetime, we get to navigate exactly how to get there. And So that might just be another theory to, why people leave early.
Yeah.
It could be part of a soul contract, it could be lessons, it could be an exit point. It
Yeah.
could be, oh, this was much harder than I actually anticipated it to be. And I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do this. Um, so, there's tons of different theories, but what I believe in is that, they're in peace and they do not want you suffering.
Yeah.
That was not the intent.
Yeah.
And heck, even if there was like this malicious, yeah, I'm sure that's really, really rare. Like
Yeah.
they do it despite
Mhm.
somebody. I mean, that just feels super extreme. Um, they still end up in this place and they still don't want you to suffer because there is no hatred or blame or resentment on the other
I heard that as well. And some of the mediums that I've been in contact with, because, I've had several readings since, everyone basically told me that his departure, his early departure, got me on the spiritual path that I was supposed to be on all along. And I said, this is all great, but I would rather not lose my child. And I would rather be stuck where I was than lose my child. So in the end, it's hard to say, oh great, yeah, thank you, Jaden, for leaving so I can be on this journey. Because that's not it most definitely doesn't feel like that. But I'm just but I can't change anything. So I have to make that conscious decision to just do better with my life and where I'm going and the direction I'm heading, and just make a difference, in also other people's lives, because this has just been something I've been pushed on the path like constantly in the past 2 years, and it's always comes, even if I ignore it, it keeps coming back.
That's the universe hitting you over the head.
Exactly, exactly. So, but yeah, thank you so much for being here. If anybody would like to connect with you, ask you more questions, or just maybe book a session with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is my website, www.bri0nicllc.com. Um, the whole binary code thing, came back, and the brain stimulator, had to go with Brionic. So you can find my socials there, you can find my emails, and you can, of course, book a session with me. And thank you so much for having me on. I love I love your journey of healing and how healing doesn't ignore or change the past. It just changes how you live in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me